Now, as we mentioned here recently on China Take, China's Vice Health Minister, Huang Jiefu, recently admitted something long suspected, but never officially confirmed, that executed criminals are still the main source of organs used in transplant operations due to the dearth of donations from the general public. Now, he said that the government had long vowed to reduce the reliance on death row inmates for organs, but high demand and a chronic shortage of donors meant they remained a key source. Huang made the remarks on the sidelines of the country's annual NPC parliamentary session in Beijing, which has just wrapped up after 10 days of meetings. In 2007, China banned the trading of human organs and 2 years later began rolling out a nationwide donation system, a voluntary donation system. But traditional taboos about how the body is treated after death and long waiting lists for transplants mean demand for organs still far outstrips supply in a country of 1.3 billion people, after all. International human rights groups have long accused the government of harvesting organs from executed prisoners for transplant without the consent of the prisoner or of their family, charges that the government has always denied. Huang's broaching of this traditionally sensitive topic has, of course, drawn a lot of public attention. So, to see what's being said online, let's cross over to the newsroom now, where our researcher Julia Liu has been following the threads. Okay, so Julia, this is the first time an official, certainly of this seniority, has actually made such an admission. Is that right?
Well, yes, and in fact, there has been some praise for Vice Minister Huang for being so open this time. In fact, 6 years ago, in 2006, the then spokesperson for the Ministry of Health, Mar.13, was quite angry when speaking about the use of executed criminals' organs for transplant. His exact words were, "Some foreign media maliciously fabricate news about China executing prisoners and arbitrarily removing organs for transplantation. This is a malicious slander of China's judiciary system, deceiving overseas public opinion with ulterior motives." So, for many people, this changing attitude is a step in the right direction and a big improvement. This is what one poster has to say on QQ.com. There are two problems when it comes to organ transplant operations. First, is the source of organ legal and ethical? Second, how should the government make relevant law and implement it well? There's no possibility of answering the second question if the first is not answered honestly. Well, this poster has this to say on the same website. One main reason that some of the unwritten rules involving organ transplant still exist is that the government wouldn't admit it was happening. And that meant there couldn't be effective supervision from the media and the public. How many people would really have been aware of such problems by simply reading the official written regulations? So this is an important step Huang has taken. But of course, it's not all praise by any means, and there's been quite a bit of criticism too.
Well, yes, I guess admitting the situation is far from ideal is a big step, but that doesn't take away from the fact that the problem is still there, isn't it? So what kind of criticism have you seen online about this?
Well, there have been plenty of critical voices out there. First of all, some people are dissatisfied with how the admission was presented and by whom. Han Bing, a visiting professor at the College of Lawyers of Renmin University, wrote on his Sina Weibo account, saying, "Now the Ministry of Health is going behind the back of the courts by becoming the first to admit that death row is the main source of organ transplants. If you don't have the authority to execute prisoners, who did you get the permission from to harvest organs? You recognize it shamefacedly, but without explaining how you cooperate, nor do you say how much you pay them, nor who you pay. If you don't explain these things, you can't claim to have come clean." And a journalist called Li Guohua calls on the Supreme Court to publish the organ transplant records over the last 10 years that were related to executed inmates, saying on Sina.com. The information should include type and quantity of organs, degree of consent from family members, profits from the transplant and how it was used, and legal evidence, and so on. While Liu Chufang, a former member of the Commission for Discipline Inspection in Tianjin, said there were a number of peculiarities in Huang's recent claim. He raises these questions. Did the family members agree? And do family members have the right to say no? Could there be live organ harvesting? And did they sell the organs for profit? And who pocketed the money? Because of the huge gap between the supply and demand for organs, is it possible that more people are executed for their organs?
Well, quite a few interesting questions being raised there. So it seems just admitting this is going on isn't really enough for many people. But as Vice Minister Huang has pointed out, there's still a lack of volunteer donors. Any discussion about the reason why, and is there any solution to that?
Oh, well, yes. About this issue, one thing that's mentioned a lot is the traditional Chinese way of thinking about the deceased body. In most developed countries, the organs used in transplant operations are mainly from volunteers. But most Chinese people still hold very strongly onto the idea that keeping the body of a dead person intact after death is the most basic respect for both the dead person themselves and their family. So besides comments calling for people to change their minds on this, there's also some other advice, like this piece on xywy.com. I don't think some type of compensation to the relatives of volunteers who donate organs is needed. Giving them money directly might arouse criticism. But some other advantages, like getting priority when they need an organ transplant or a contribution towards the funeral expenses, might still be acceptable. And whether you like it or not, this would result in a massive increase in the number of volunteer organ donors. And finally, besides other comments on ways to encourage volunteers, there's also some comments on the hospitals and a word of caution. This poster says, "It's important to encourage people to volunteer, but it's also essential that hospitals can distribute the organs fairly and transparently. Otherwise, it will be hugely unfair if money and power becomes the standards of who can get an organ transplant operation or not."